bandits burst into a girl's home, unaware of who lives with her. What could possibly be more terrifying than the heart-stopping moment when ruthless bandits shatter the fragile peace of your home in the dead of night, their boots thudding against the floor like harbingers of doom? Or is it the chilling realization that dawns on those very bandits? The gut-wrenching terror when they understand, too late, that they've stormed the wrong door, unleashing a nightmare far beyond their wildest fears. One that claws at their souls and turns their greed into a desperate fight for survival? The sharp, resounding snap of the old wire cutters echoed through the thick, oppressive silence of the night like a sudden crack of thunder, piercing the veil of darkness and sending an involuntary ripple of unease through the air. The thick telephone cable, snaking its way toward the isolated house like a lifeline to civilization, sagged lifelessly to the ground, severed clean through in a single, merciless cut that isolated the inhabitants from any hope of calling for help. Just a heartbeat later, the main power switch on the nearby utility pole was yanked downward with a decisive, ominous click, and the solitary, flickering light in the second-floor window. A lone, fragile beacon glowing defiantly amidst the vast, endless expanse of shadowy forest, snuffed out abruptly, plunging the entire scene into an all-consuming, inky blackness that felt alive, pulsating with malice and foreboding. Vyacheslav Gromov, a man everyone knew simply as Slava, nodded with a cold, calculated satisfaction that masked the turbulent storm of emotions raging within his hardened heart. A mix of anticipation, greed, and the faint, nagging whisper of caution born from years of living on the edge. The tip-off had been impeccable, as pure and reliable as a tear shed in genuine sorrow, untainted by doubt or deception. This was no ordinary mark. It was a sprawling, secluded house once belonging to a pair of renowned biologists, tragic souls who had met their untimely and mysterious end a year ago in circumstances that still fueled whispered rumors in the local taverns and marketplaces. Their elderly mother, a frail woman clinging to the remnants of her life with quiet dignity, had departed just a week earlier for a series of medical examinations in the distant regional center, leaving the property eerily empty and vulnerable, like a forgotten treasure chest waiting to be plundered. According to the informant, a shady figure with shifty eyes and a voice dripping with false confidence, the house concealed a sturdy safe brimming with cash from the recent sale of their urban apartment, along with priceless family heirlooms and jewels that sparkled with the allure of generations past. It was the ultimate score for men like Slava, a job that promised to be as quiet as a whisper in the wind, as swift as a predator's lethal strike, and as profitable as a king's ransom, capable of erasing the scars of past failures and paving the way to a life less haunted by the shadows of crime. His partner in this dark endeavor, Diamond, shifted restlessly from one foot to the other, his buzz-cut head and thick, bull-like neck betraying the raw, simmering impatience that bubbled just beneath his tough, weathered exterior. A volatile cocktail of nervous energy and unchecked greed that made him twitch like a fuse ready to ignite. "What's the hold-up, Slava? Let's get this done," he hissed through gritted teeth, his voice low but laced with an undercurrent of urgency that echoed the frantic beating of his heart, a heart that had seen too many close calls and craved the rush of victory. Slava cast him a weary, admonishing glance, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of a man who had navigated the treacherous waters of the criminal underworld for far too long. At 42, with a face etched deep with the harsh lines of prison stints and countless life-or-death scrapes that had left invisible scars on his soul, he understood all too intimately the deadly price of haste, the way it could transform a flawless plan into a catastrophic bloodbath in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing but regrets and empty hands. "Keep it down. No mess-ups," he snapped back sharply, his tone brooking no argument, a command forged in the fires of experience. "Petya, you're on lookout. Keep the radio on at all times. If anything smells off, 2 short signals." "Got that." From the concealing shadows of the old Lada 9, parked discreetly on the rutted forest road like a silent sentinel, came a timid, frightened squeak of affirmation. "Got it, Slava." With that reluctant assurance hanging in the air, Slava and Diamond advanced toward the house, their footsteps muffled by the soft blanket of fallen leaves and pine needles underfoot, their hearts pounding with the intoxicating adrenaline of the hunt, a hunt that promised riches but hid perils they couldn't yet fathom. They circled the structure methodically, their eyes peering intently into the darkened windows with the sharp focus of seasoned predators assessing their prey, hearts thumping in anticipation of the easy score that lay within. The silence enveloping them was profound, almost suffocating in its completeness, interrupted only by the relentless, rhythmic chirping of crickets that seemed to mock their stealthy intrusion, as if the night itself was alive and watching with amused disdain. The house loomed before them, appearing slumbering and utterly defenseless under the canopy of a starless sky, its walls holding secrets they were eager to rip open and claim as their own. Diamond wedged the cold steel of the crowbar into the first-floor window frame, the wood protesting with a soft, splintering crunch that sent a jolt of tension through both men, their nerves stretched taut like bowstrings ready to snap. The window yielded reluctantly, swinging open to reveal the pitch-black interior, where a stale, musty scent of aged wood and forgotten dust wafted out like the breath of a long-abandoned tomb. "All clear inside," Diamond muttered under his breath, his voice a gritty mix of relief and building excitement, before hoisting his bulky frame through the opening with the practiced agility of a man accustomed to slipping through shadows and evading the law's grasp. Slava followed suit, his movements fluid and nearly noiseless, a testament to years spent honing the art of invisibility in the criminal shadows, his heart racing with the thrill of the breach. He flicked on a powerful flashlight, its piercing beam slicing through the oppressive gloom of the living room like a blade through thick fog. Dust motes swirled and danced chaotically in the sudden light, as if disturbed by their unwelcome presence, creating an ethereal, almost ghostly atmosphere that heightened the sense of intrusion. Old furniture loomed in the shadows like silent sentinels from another era. Towering bookcases lined the walls from floor to ceiling, crammed with volumes that spoke of intellectual pursuits far removed from their grubby world of crime. Everything matched the informant's description to a T, fueling their greed with the promise of hidden wealth. They were alone in this treasure trove of opportunity, or so they believed, their overconfidence blinding them to the lurking danger that simmered just beyond the beam's reach. A danger that would soon erupt and transform their triumphant heist into a harrowing fight for survival, filled with fear, pain, and the raw taste of regret. Before we delve deeper into this gripping tale of unexpected twists, heart-pounding tension, and the unbreakable bonds that can turn the tide against evil, let us know. What city are you tuning in from? We're genuinely curious about the diverse places where our viewers are connecting with these stories, as it helps us tailor more content that resonates across the globe. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button on the channel and drop a like if this narrative has you on the edge of your seat. Your engagement is the fuel that keeps us creating more thrilling, emotionally charged videos like this one. And now, let's plunge back into the story, where the night takes a turn from bad to unimaginable horror. Suddenly, Diamond froze mid-step, his body tensing like a coiled spring ready to unleash, his face draining of color in the flashlight's stark glow. He raised his hand slowly, a silent, urgent command for Slava to halt immediately and listen intently. Slava obeyed without question, his senses sharpening in the heavy, claustrophobic air of the room, his heart skipping a beat as he strained to detect what had spooked his partner. At first, he perceived nothing unusual amid the stifling quiet, but then it hit him. Not a sound in the traditional sense, but a deep, resonant vibration, low and almost below the threshold of human hearing, pulsing through the floorboards like an earthquake's precursor. It reverberated up from the depths of the room, vibrating through the soles of his boots and settling uneasily in his chest like an ominous harbinger of doom, making his skin crawl with primal instinct. Diamond slowly, with a hand that trembled slightly despite his tough facade, swung his flashlight beam toward the dark, foreboding corner beside a large, worn armchair, and what the light revealed made his blood run cold, freezing him in place with a surge of raw, unadulterated fear that gripped his throat like an invisible hand. From the enveloping shadows, two pairs of eyes stared back at them with unyielding intensity. These weren't ordinary eyes that merely reflected the light. They glowed with a fierce, molten golden fire, bright, predatory, and utterly unblinking, piercing the darkness like twin suns of malice that sent icy fingers of dread clutching at their very souls, evoking a terror so profound it bordered on the supernatural. The beam dipped lower, casting its harsh illumination on two enormous black silhouettes that had been lying motionless on the floor but now rose with an eerie, deliberate silence, their massive forms unfolding like nightmares materializing from the void. The fur on their powerful napes stood on end like sharp needles of warning, bristling with aggressive intent. These were no mere dogs, no domesticated pets barking in alarm. They were too massive for that, too feral in their stance, too unnaturally quiet in their menace. Their presence exuded a wild, untamed power that made the air thick with the promise of violence, evoking images of ancient predators stalking through primordial forests, hearts of beasts beating with the rhythm of the hunt. Their movements were graceful and fluid, almost cat-like in their predatory elegance, but the raw, overwhelming strength radiating from them was purely beastly, a force of nature that commanded respect and instilled paralyzing fear. From one of the throats emerged a deep, guttural growl. Not the sharp bark of a warning dog, but a low, resonant verdict of impending destruction. A sound that vibrated through the bones and chilled the blood in their veins like a whisper from the grave. Slava, who had endured the soul-crushing confines of prison cells and survived dozens of life-or-death confrontations that would have broken lesser men, felt an unprecedented wave of icy, gut-wrenching terror surge through him, freezing him in place as if the cold hand of death itself had gripped his spine. The informant had conveniently omitted any mention of guards, and guards like these were the stuff of legends and nightmares, not even dreamt up in the fortified estates of the ultra-wealthy oligarchs he had envied from afar. Diamond, his panic rising like bile in his throat, fumbled desperately for the pistol tucked securely into his belt, his fingers clumsy with the sudden rush of adrenaline-fueled fear. "Hold it right there, you fool," Slava hissed urgently, seizing his arm in a vice-like grip that brooked no resistance. "One single shot, and the entire forest will come alive with alarms. We'll be swarmed before we can blink." Deep down, in the pit of his stomach where instinct screamed warnings, he doubted Diamond could even manage to fire twice before one of those monstrous beasts lunged forward with lethal precision and tore into his throat, ending the night in a spray of blood and screams. They were well and truly ensnared, in the very house they had so arrogantly invaded, their greed transforming into a trap of their own making, the darkness closing in with fangs and claws, turning what should have been a quick score into a harrowing battle for their lives. Upstairs on the second floor, 15-year-old Alya was far from the peaceful slumber one might expect in such a remote haven. Instead, she was wide awake, her young heart pounding not from the fear that gripped ordinary girls her age, but from a fierce, protective instinct that had become her armor in this world of loss and isolation. She sat huddled on her bed, her knees drawn tightly to her chest like a shield against the encroaching shadows, immersed in the pages of a well-worn book illuminated by the soft, steady glow of a handheld flashlight. The words a temporary refuge from the persistent loneliness that had wrapped around her life like a suffocating fog since her parents' tragic death. She heard the intrusive, telltale crunch of the window frame being forced open below almost immediately, the sound cutting through the night like a familiar signal. But panic didn't seize her fragile frame. Instead, a calm, resolute determination settled over her, born from months of living on the razor's edge in this isolated home, where every noise could mean danger or simply the wind playing tricks. Her acute senses, honed by the necessity of survival in this wild place, had taught her to distinguish threat from harmlessness, and this was no ordinary creak of settling wood. But when the low, rumbling growl reached her ears from downstairs, her heart tightened in a vice of worry and concern. Not for her own safety, but for them, her unwavering companions who had become her everything in the wake of unimaginable grief. Veles and Noch, her loyal pack, her guardians, her family in a world that had stripped her of blood relatives. The memory of the district officer's stern, almost pleading warning from Saturday flooded back, his face lined with genuine concern as he stood in her doorway, his uniform a symbol of authority she had learned to distrust. "Alya, I'm asking you nicely this time, begging, really? One more complaint from the dacha owners about those wolves of yours roaming the property, and my hands will be tied tighter than a noose. Animal control will roll in, and you know exactly what that'll mean for them, cages or worse." The thought of losing her companions, the ones who had pulled her from the dark abyss of despair after her parents' sudden departure from this world, was a pain sharper than any physical wound, a terror that haunted her dreams. So now, with the unmistakable sounds of strangers invading her sanctuary below, her deepest, most gut-wrenching fear was that her wolves would fulfill their natural, primal instincts, tearing into the threats with ferocious efficiency, and in doing so, seal their own fate to the cold barrels of guns or the sterile confines of captivity, leaving her utterly alone once more. Overcoming the tremble in her knees that betrayed her youth and the vulnerability she kept hidden beneath layers of resolve, she slipped silently from the bed, her movements as quiet as a shadow gliding across the moonlit floor. Barefoot to avoid any betraying creak, she approached her bedroom door with the stealth of someone who knew every inch of the house like an extension of her own body, her heart thumping like a war drum in the quiet night. She eased the door open just a crack, the hinges whispering softly in protest. From below wafted the muffled, tense voices of the intruders, laced with urgency and greed, intertwined with the low, menacing growl of her boys. A sound that filled her with a complex mix of pride in their loyalty and dread for what might come next. She had to intervene, to prevent the bloodshed that loomed like a storm cloud, before the night devolved into a tragedy that would shatter her world anew. Slowly, placing each foot with deliberate care on tiptoe to avoid the telltale creaks of the ancient staircase that could give her away, she descended into the fray, each step a test of her courage and composure, her mind racing with plans to de-escalate the brewing violence. When she reached the bottom step, the scene before her in the living room froze her blood for a split second before her resolve kicked in. Two burglars, one tall and lean with a calculating gaze, the other stocky and aggressive, his face twisted in fear, backed into the corner by the unyielding presence of her wolves. And facing them, mere meters away, stood Veles and Noch, her magnificent black guardians, poised like coiled springs of raw power, ready to unleash hell upon the invaders who dared threaten their alpha. Their fangs bared in a gleaming display of lethal intent, eyes locked on the threats with an unyielding focus that spoke of ancient instincts honed by survival in the wild. In that charged instant, the younger man jerked toward his weapon again, his movement born of pure desperation and panic. It was the spark that could ignite the powder keg. Veles unleashed a short, guttural roar that vibrated through the air like a wave of impending doom, crouching low for the lethal pounce that would end the confrontation in a frenzy of blood and screams. There was no more time to hesitate. The moment teetered on the brink of irreversible tragedy. Stand! Alya's voice cut through the chaos like a whip crack, quiet yet infused with an unshakable authority, the kind forged in the crucible of loss and the unbreakable bond she shared with her pack. To the utter, jaw-dropping disbelief of the two hardened criminals, the wolves obeyed instantly, halting their advance mid-motion as if bound by an invisible chain. They didn't cease their low, rumbling growls, a constant undercurrent of warning that filled the room with tension. But their attention divided, heads turning slowly toward the stairs with a loyalty that defied explanation. From the dim, shadowy recess emerged a slender girl in an old, faded t-shirt and shorts, her long auburn hair tied in a messy ponytail that spoke of hasty bedtime preparations, her gray eyes burning with a cold, unyielding determination that belied her tender age and fragile appearance. The power dynamic flipped in a heartbeat, from arrogant predators to cornered prey, the bandits now facing not just the beasts, but a girl who commanded them like extensions of her own will, her presence radiating a quiet power that turned the tide in ways they could never have anticipated, sending waves of confusion and fear crashing over them. Slava, the veteran crook with a mind sharpened by years of outwitting the law, quickly recalibrated the chaotic situation in his racing thoughts. Yes, they had identified a potential vulnerability now, the girl, a seemingly easy target in this madhouse. But this child, this slip of a teenager standing before them with the poise of a queen, held absolute dominion over two ferocious monsters, creatures capable of dismembering them in mere seconds with savage efficiency, her control over them turning the room into a deadly arena where one wrong move could spell their gruesome end. Diamond, less calculating and more driven by raw impulse and rage, saw the girl's appearance as a golden opportunity to regain the upper hand he felt slipping away. "Get over here, you little brat," he bellowed with a snarl, swinging the flashlight's beam and his pistol toward Alya with menacing intent, his voice echoing off the walls like a threat from the depths of hell. "Tell your damn mutts to back off to their kennel, or I'll make you regret it." The wolves reacted to his aggressive outburst with synchronized, bone-chilling growls that vibrated through the floor, their nape fur bristling like spikes of pure fury, ready to defend their alpha at any cost, their loyalty of force as unyielding as nature itself. "They're not mutts," Alya replied, her voice a pillar of calm amid the storm, not budging an inch despite the deadly weapon trained on her fragile form, her words carrying the weight of unshakable truth. "And they absolutely hate it when people yell at me." Her unflinching composure, a shield forged from necessity and bond, infuriated the men to no end while simultaneously unnerving them to their core, amplifying the already suffocating terror of their predicament, making them question every choice that led them here. Slava realized in that moment that brute force was not just unwise. It was suicide, a sure path to a bloody demise at the fangs of those beasts. He needed to seize the reins of this escalating nightmare with cunning, not muscle. "Girl, let's keep this civil and avoid any foolish mistakes," he said, his tone wavering slightly from its earlier street-hardened confidence, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like an invisible anvil, forcing him to adapt or perish. "We're not here to harm you. All we want is your dad's stash, the safe with the cash and jewels. Point us to it, and we'll vanish into the night like we were never here. No one gets hurt, no mess left behind." Alya's lips curved in a bitter, sorrowful smirk, a flash of deep-seated grief crossing her features as memories of her lost parents surged forward like a tidal wave, sharpening her resolve into a blade of defiance. "My dad has no stash for the likes of you," she countered, her voice steady but laced with the pain of loss that made her words cut deeper. "He was a scientist, dedicated to knowledge and discovery, not hoarding riches. This house holds only books filled with wisdom and old bones from his research. Nothing that would interest heartless thieves like you." "You lying little—" Diamond exploded, his frustration boiling over into rage, but Slava silenced him with a sharp look. "We know there's millions here from the apartment sale," Diamond pressed, his voice dripping with menace. "Where's the safe? Spill it." "There's no safe," Alya insisted, her gray eyes locking onto his with a piercing intensity that made him flinch inwardly, her calm demeanor a fortress against their storm of greed. She was stalling with every fiber of her being, every word a deliberate barrier, knowing that time was her greatest ally in this desperate standoff, each passing second eroding their confidence and heightening their fear. "Okay then," Slava shifted his approach once more, trying to mask his growing unease with a coaxing, almost fatherly tone that rang false even to his own ears, desperate to defuse the powder keg before it exploded in their faces. "We'll hunt for it ourselves, and you just stay right where you are." He left the threat unspoken, hanging in the air like a noose, but its implication was crystal clear, a warning of violence if she interfered. He attempted to sidestep toward the adjoining rooms to begin the search, but he halted abruptly as if hitting an invisible wall. The wolves mirrored his movement with eerie precision, taking a synchronized step forward to block his path with their imposing, muscular forms, their yellow eyes boring into him like lasers of judgment. Alya said nothing. She didn't need to utter a word. The wolves acted on their own volition, their instincts attuned to her subtle cues of tension, reacting with a protectiveness that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Without her calming influence, they'd have torn the men apart in a frenzy of fangs and fury already. Even with her there, maintaining a fragile peace, they enforced unbreakable boundaries, turning the room into a high-stakes prison where the intruders were the captives, their every move scrutinized by beasts ready to pounce at the slightest provocation. The standoff was now complete and absolute, a tense, electrifying tableau of fear, defiance, and the razor-thin line between life and death, where one wrong breath could shatter the calm and unleash chaos. They were all locked in that one room. Two desperate, cornered bandits with hearts full of greed and fear, one unyielding girl whose calm masked a storm of emotions, and two lethal wolves whose loyalty was a force of nature itself. The nerves of everyone involved were frayed to the breaking point, the air thick with the electric charge of impending violence, each second stretching into an eternity of suspense as the intruders grappled with the horrifying reality of their colossal mistake, the weight of it crushing their spirits. Out on the shadowy forest road, in the confines of the old Lada 9, Pyotr Samov, better known as Petya, wiped his clammy, sweaty palms on his jeans for what felt like the 100th time, his anxiety building to a crescendo like a storm gathering force. More than half an hour had elapsed since Slava and Diamond had disappeared into the house's maw, a delay that screamed trouble in this line of work. Far too long for what should have been a simple in-and-out burglary. He tried radioing Slava repeatedly, his voice trembling with growing panic, but only the mocking crackle of static replied, amplifying his dread to unbearable levels. His heart pounded wildly in his throat like a trapped animal desperate for escape, this being his first major criminal venture at the tender age of 19, and it was unraveling before his eyes in ways he couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares. He'd envisioned a smooth operation. Quick entry, grab the loot, and vanish into the night with cash in hand, the thrill of success coursing through his veins. Instead, this suffocating silence and gnawing uncertainty clawed at his mind, planting seeds of doubt and fear that bloomed into full-blown terror. The urge to ignite the engine and flee surged through him like a tidal wave. Ditch the whole mess, save his own skin before it was too late. but the paralyzing fear of Slava's wrath, a man known for his merciless retribution, pinned him in place like chains, a terror deeper and more personal than any lawman's badge or prison cell, for the moment at least. Back inside the house, the tension had escalated to a fever pitch, a cauldron of raw emotions bubbling over with the potential for explosive violence. Diamond, his agitation mounting under the unrelenting, piercing stare of the wolves, whispered frantically to Slava, his voice cracking with strain. "Slava, let's scare the kid good. She'll crack like an egg, spill everything." Slava shot him a sharp, warning glare, his mind racing through possible escapes from this nightmare. "You fool, don't you get it? She holds the reins on those beasts. She's our only insurance policy against getting torn to shreds, and at the same time our biggest damn problem in this hellhole." He turned back to Alya, forcing a paternal, coaxing note into his voice that rang hollow even to his own ears, a desperate attempt to defuse the ticking bomb of a situation before it detonated in their faces. "Alina, that's your name, right? Listen to me, kid, we don't want any trouble here. No blood on anyone's hands. All we're after is the metal box your dad kept, the safe with the cash and jewels from the apartment sale. Just point us in the right direction, and we'll be gone like smoke in the wind. Forget this night ever happened, and you can do the same." Alya's heart pounded relentlessly, but she met his gaze head-on, drawing an inner strength from the wolves' steadfast presence beside her, their loyalty an anchor in the storm of fear and defiance raging within. "I don't know anything about any box," she lied again, her voice a calm fortress amid the whirlwind of emotions, though her pulse roared in her ears like a distant waterfall. Her calm was a carefully constructed mask, hiding the turmoil of grief and anger beneath. Every word she spoke a deliberate act of resistance, buying precious time in this high-stakes game where seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Slava's eyes narrowed to slits. He could sense the deception hanging in the air like smoke, but pushing her harder risked igniting the wolves' fury. Lingering until dawn, when light would expose them, was tantamount to suicide. "Fine, we'll do it the hard way," he conceded, his voice tight with frustration and a growing sense of dread. "You'll lead the way. Diamond, bring up the rear, and for God's sake, no sudden moves that could set them off." Everyone in the group, they set off in this tense procession. Alya took the lead, her phone's flashlight casting long, eerie shadows that danced mockingly on the walls like specters from her past. Slava followed mere inches behind, his hot breath on her neck a constant reminder of the danger, keeping her firmly in his sights as if she were a prisoner in her own home. Diamond trailed at the rear, his eyes darting fearfully to the wolves, who padded along like silent, deadly guardians, two dark apparitions embodying the wild's vengeance. Their presence was a living, breathing nightmare, every soft pad of their paws a harbinger of potential doom, the air thick with the scent of fear and impending catastrophe. This bizarre, surreal parade through the dimly lit halls of the house was like something out of a fever dream, a twisted march where predators had become the prey. Alya deliberately chose the path upstairs, her intimate knowledge of the house's quirks allowing her to prolong the ordeal as much as possible. Creaky floorboards that groaned under weight, doors that stuck and required extra effort to open, anything to stretch out the minutes and erode their confidence. "Perhaps it's in my parents' bedroom?" she suggested with feigned innocence, her voice steady but her heart aching as they entered the room. It was a frozen snapshot of her life before the tragedy. The neatly made bed that no one had slept in for a year, the stack of books on the nightstand gathering dust, the faint, ghostly scent of her mother's perfume lingering like a bittersweet memory that brought tears to her eyes beneath her composed facade. Slava and Diamond ransacked the space without a shred of remorse, yanking open drawers with violent tugs, scattering clothes and personal items in a frenzy of destruction that desecrated the sacred remnants of her family's life. Alya stood at the door, her fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms, drawing tiny beads of blood, her rage simmering just below the surface of her stoic expression, the wolves at her side growling low in empathy with her distress. "Nothing here," Diamond snarled in frustration, his temper flaring as he knocked a cherished framed photo of her parents to the floor with a careless sweep of his arm. The glass shattered with a sharp, resounding crack that echoed through the room like the breaking of her heart all over again, shards scattering like fragments of her shattered world. In that instant, something deep within Alya snapped, a surge of righteous anger that pierced through her calm like lightning. Her gaze turned lethal, her voice dropping to a frosty whisper that cut like a blade. "I told you so. There's nothing for you here. Maybe my father's study is where you're looking?" she continued, leading them onward, her mind racing with ways to extend the delay, to turn the tables on these despoilers who had invaded not just her home, but the very essence of her memories. They entered the study, a sanctuary filled with towering shelves of books and scientific papers, the air thick with the musty aroma of aged paper and forgotten knowledge. A room that had once echoed with her father's passionate discussions and now stood as a mausoleum to his legacy. Here, concealed behind a bookshelf, was the niche she knew all too well. Slava spotted it almost immediately, his seasoned thief's eye catching the slight irregularity in the loose board that betrayed its secret. He pried it open with the cold efficiency of his knife, the wood splintering under the pressure. Behind it lay the small metal box, its presence a mocking twist in their quest. "Knew you were holding out on us?" Diamond sneered with triumphant malice. "Open it up," Slava commanded, his voice a blend of eagerness and threat, believing victory was finally within grasp. Alya's heart raced like a wild stallion trapped in a storm, this moment the final stand in her desperate bid to protect her home. She turned the small key that had always hung discreetly behind a particular book, the lock clicking open with a sound that resonated in the silence like the final toll of a bell signaling doom. Slava flipped the lid eagerly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, and then his face fell, the triumph souring instantly to shock and disbelief. Diamond leaned over his shoulder, his expression twisting from glee to raw disappointment, a guttural curse escaping his lips. No stacks of crisp banknotes awaited them, no glittering jewels to fuel their dreams of easy wealth. Instead, the box contained a poignant collection of old letters bound with a faded ribbon, whispering tales of love and life long past. A meager few thousand rubles set aside for everyday household needs, hardly enough to tempt a beggar. Her mother's simple, worn earrings that had once adorned her ears during happier times but now lay forgotten, and a faded photograph capturing a family moment frozen in joy, a relic of love that no amount of money could replace. The box held not material treasure, but treasures of the heart, poignant mementos of a family torn apart by tragedy, now profaned by the greedy hands of intruders who had no right to touch such sacred items. Diamond's fury erupted like a volcano long dormant, his face contorting in rage as he rounded on Alya. "You lying little bitch!" he roared, lunging toward her with murderous intent, his hands outstretched like claws ready to tear. "Where's the real safe? Tell me or I'll make you." The wolves exploded into ferocious action, a whirlwind of black fur, muscle, and razor-sharp fangs that blurred the line between guardian and avenger. Diamond let out a blood-curdling scream as teeth sank deep into his arm, the crunch of bone echoing horribly in the confined space, blood spraying in a macabre arc that painted the walls in crimson horror. Slava backed away frantically, his pistol drawn but his hands trembling uncontrollably, the reality of their grave, fatal mistake crashing down upon him like an avalanche of regret and fear. "Call them off. For God's sake, stop them!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic, the once confident leader reduced to a man begging for mercy in the face of unrelenting nature. Alya stood tall amid the chaos, her presence a beacon of authority, her voice cutting through the screams like a command from the wild itself. "Enough!" she ordered, her tone infused with the unshakable bond she shared with her pack. The wolves released their grip instantly, retreating to her side with disciplined obedience, their muzzles stained with the intruder's blood, their eyes still locked on the wounded man with an unquenchable vigilance that promised more if provoked again. Diamond writhed on the floor in agony, clutching his ravaged arm as blood pooled around him in a dark, sticky lake that mirrored the darkness of his soul and the failure of their plan. Slava hauled him up roughly, panic and terror clawing at his composure like wild animals, the weight of their colossal blunder crushing his spirit. "We're getting out now," he muttered through gritted teeth, dragging Diamond toward the broken window. Their dream heist dissolved into a nightmare of pain, blood, and humiliating defeat. They tumbled clumsily out into the cold embrace of the night, Diamond's agonized moans fading into the forest like the pitiful cries of a defeated beast, leaving behind a trail of blood and shattered illusions. Alya watched from the window, her body finally trembling as the adrenaline ebbed away, leaving her with the raw, exhausting aftermath of the violation. The broken glass, the scattered belongings, the bloodstains that would forever mark this night in her memory. With hands that were steady despite the inner turmoil, she picked up the phone and dialed the police. Her voice calm but edged with the fire of survival and justice. "There were intruders in my home. They've fled, but please send help. There's blood everywhere." The district officer, Stepanov, arrived as the first light of dawn pierced the horizon, his flashlight sweeping over the chaotic scene. The shattered window frame hanging like a wound, the blood trails congealing on the floor, the wolves now confined to their sturdy enclosure in the yard, their piercing eyes still watchful through the wire mesh, as if daring anyone to threaten their domain again. "What in God's name happened here?" he demanded, his voice a blend of professional authority and genuine concern, his face paling as he took in the destruction. Alya recounted the harrowing ordeal step by step, her words painting a vivid, chilling picture of the intrusion, the confrontation, and the wolves' fierce, protective defense, omitting nothing that could aid the investigation. Stepanov listened intently, his expression shifting from initial skepticism to wide-eyed awe as he glanced at the massive beasts in the enclosure. Those aren't dogs," he stated, stepping back instinctively, a hint of primal fear flickering in his seasoned eyes. "They're my family," Alya replied without hesitation, her chin lifted in proud defiance, her bond with them unbreakable, forged in the fires of loneliness and mutual survival. "They saved my life from those monsters who invaded our home." Stepanov rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his mind wrestling with the implications. "This is a complicated mess, kid. Wolves are classified as wild animals, could bring down a world of trouble from higher up, licenses, regulations, you name it." But as he observed the unbreakable connection between the girl and her guardians, his stern facade began to crack, revealing a glimmer of understanding. "I'll file the report framing them as highly trained guard dogs for now, but you keep them locked down tight. No more complaints about them roaming free, or I can't protect you from the bureaucracy." The investigation launched with renewed vigor, police combing the scene for clues, hearts heavy with the knowledge that such violence had touched this remote haven. Alya collaborated closely, providing a detailed composite sketch of Slava. His weary, calculating features, the faint scar arching over his brow like a mark of past sins, the faded tattoos on his knuckles that she had glimpsed in the flashlight's glare. She sketched them with uncanny precision, her hands steady despite the lingering trauma, as if channeling her resolve into every line. Stepanov studied the finished portrait, his face darkening with grim recognition. "Gromov," he muttered under his breath, the name carrying the heavy weight of a dark, infamous legend in the criminal underworld. Vyacheslav Gromov goes by Grom, a notorious recidivist just out of prison after a long stretch. This is bad news, very bad. He's dangerous, cunning, and now he's got a grudge. Meanwhile, in a dingy hideout on a forsaken industrial zone, Slava Gromov nursed his wounds and his seething rage, the failure burning in his gut like acid. "That girl," he growled to Petya, his voice a low rumble of vengeance. "She and those beasts. She'll pay for this humiliation." His eyes burned with a cold fire, plotting retribution that would make her regret ever standing against him. Diamond ended up in the regional hospital, his arm saved through emergency surgery but left a twisted ruin of pins, plates, and scars. A permanent reminder of the night that broke him physically and spiritually. He stonewalled the police interrogators, his face a mask of stubborn silence, fearing Slava's long reach more than any prison sentence, his loyalty twisted by terror. Petya, tasked with driving Slava to confront the informant who had led them astray, felt his nerves fray to the breaking point as they approached the pawn shop. Guilt and self-preservation warred within him like battling storms. He recalled the girl's unyielding stand against them, her wolves obeying her with absolute devotion. If a teenager could defy Slava, so could he. With trembling hands, he dialed the emergency line. "Hello? Vyacheslav Gromov, he's at the pawn shop on Lenin Street. He's armed and dangerous." He tossed the phone aside and slammed the accelerator, tires screeching as he fled the life that had ensnared him, the sound a cry for freedom echoing into the night. The call was the final piece in the puzzle. In the operational headquarters set up after Stepanov's alert, the information triggered immediate action. The SWAT team, already surveilling the pawn shop based on leads, received the green light for assault. It happened in a flash. The door exploded inward amid shouts of "Police!" On the ground. Gromov, ever the fighter, drew his pistol and fired wildly in a last stand of defiance. But he was outnumbered and outgunned. One man against a team trained for precisely this. Seconds later, he lay face down on the grimy floor, wrists secured in cold steel cuffs. The once mighty legend reduced to a captured, humiliated shell of a man, his empire of fear crumbling to dust. Stepanov received the confirmation while staked out near Alya's house, a flood of relief washing over him like a cleansing rain after a long drought. He started his UAZ and drove up to the house, entering without knocking, finding Alya and her grandmother in the corridor, the shotgun still at the ready, their faces etched with the vigilant determination of survivors. "It's over," he announced, his voice heavy with the finality of justice served. "Grom's in custody, taken alive, no more threat." The grandmother lowered the weapon slowly, her hands shaking from the prolonged strain of readiness. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Alya approached the window, gazing out at the enclosure where Veles and Noch stood as eternal sentinels, their eyes reflecting the bond that had saved them all. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of fear, uncertainty, and fierce protection. But now, with the shadow lifted, a sense of peace began to settle. Diamond, serving his sentence in a cold cell, eventually cracked under pressure, spilling every detail against Gromov's gang, his mangled arm a throbbing testament to the night that had shattered his illusions of invincibility. Petya, turning himself in with a heavy heart, received leniency as the key witness whose courageous call had tipped the scales, his act of redemption earning him a chance at a new life free from the chains of crime. For Alya, the true battle lingered, the fate of her wolves hanging in the balance like a sword over her head. Complaints from neighbors piled up, fear-mongering about the wild beasts roaming the property. But Stepanov, true to his word, championed her cause with unwavering support. His official report framed Veles and Noch as exemplary, highly trained guard dogs that had played a pivotal role in apprehending a dangerous criminal, emphasizing their controlled behavior and Alya's responsible handling. He attached glowing character references from her grandmother, vaccination records she had meticulously maintained, and his own personal endorsement, highlighting her bravery in aiding the investigation. A special commission was formed, their arrival a nerve-wracking ordeal of inspections and interrogations that tested Alya's resolve to its limits. They scrutinized the enclosure, questioned her care routines, and debated the risks. Days stretched into agonizing waits, filled with anxiety and hope. In the end, in a groundbreaking decision considering her unique circumstances, her instrumental role in Gromov's capture, and the impeccable conditions in which the wolves were kept, proving they posed no threat beyond her property, they granted permission for Veles and Noch to remain with her until she reached adulthood, under strict guidelines and regular check-ins. It was a victory hard-fought and deeply emotional, a testament to her unyielding spirit. Weeks later, as summer bloomed in full glory, casting warm golden light over the forest, Alya sat on the porch of her home, the very one she had defended with every ounce of her being. Veles and Noch lay at her feet, their heavy heads resting on her lap in contented peace, their presence a constant source of strength and love. The world around her was quiet and serene. The threats of the past faded like shadows at dawn. She gazed into the forest, then down at her faithful companions, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a genuine, soul-deep smile graced her lips, a smile born of survival, love, and the unbreakable bonds that had carried her through the darkness. She was home, truly home, with her pack by her side in this wild, beautiful world. What do you think? Who acted more rightly in the end? Petya, who betrayed the bandit to save his own skin in a moment of desperate self-preservation, or Stepanov, who bent the rigid rules of the system to preserve the wolves and protect an innocent girl's unique family?